So here is an article from Variety. So it's Emilia Clarke, who obviously starred in Game of Thrones as Daenerys Targaryen. So it talks about salary rumours, Ponies season 2, living with survivor's guilt. I know she's had medical issues. So there's a lot to talk about in this article. But what I'm going to concentrate on is her attitude towards her work and towards the fans. So I'm going to skip a lot of it. But first, I will start at the beginning. So, the morning after the 2019 Emmy Awards, Emilia Clarke woke up with a goal to redefine what she saw as success. By any measure, Clarke was already wildly successful. So, we're 2019, so we're into the last season of Game of Thrones. She starred in Terminator. She starred in a Star Wars spin off show. She was in Solo. I really liked her in Solo. And I guess she was nominated for an Emmy as Daenerys Targaryen. But the movies, 2015's Terminator Genesis and 2018's Solo, a Star Wars movie, underperformed. Yeah, I've seen kind of both of those. Genesis is kind of what's the point? Why bother? And there's kind of a similar vibe um, with Solo. There's lots of member berries in Solo, but it doesn't add up to much. Then in May 2019, Game of Thrones came to an abrupt and almost universally hated end. Even Clarke admits she was absolutely livid about the manner of her demise. So that's interesting. She feels able to criticize the show a little bit, along with the fans. She was able to acknowledge their disappointment. Still, 4 months later, she was at the Emmys, her first time in the running for lead actress in a drama. While Game of Thrones ended on a downer, winning would be a way to close the chapter on a victorious note. But on the night, Jodie Comer took home the award for killing Eve. Clarke was crushed. So, along with season 8 being bad, she misses the Emmy. I'm embarrassed to admit that not winning an Emmy was a really significant thing. Tired and sad, she skipped the after parties and went home. The next morning, Clarke vowed never to behave that way again. I do not like that person, she thought, reproaching herself. The solution, she decided, was to redefine success. So she has a look, she has a little bit of a failure, and then decides it's not so important. Outside the show, Game of Thrones, there were forays into other franchises, concluding with the fast forgotten Marvel series Secret Invasion in 2022. Clarke is under no illusion about how those projects were received. Of Secret Invasion, she says in a goofy voice, I don't think no one liked that show, guys. I'm sorry. And then, yeah, that kind of fits. Secret Invasion was a bit of a critical failure, at least. I don't know about audience. She continues Star Wars, they didn't like it. Terminator, that should never have happened. But those were jobs I said yes to. You know what I mean? Okay, so she's able to acknowledge that those things just didn't work out. What about the receptions to those? Were the frosty receptions disappointing? I entered into already existing franchises, she says, so when they don't work out, it's not personal. So that's really nice. So she kind of she takes it on the chin really well, I think. So she says she decided taking on a role for no other reason than that I would enjoy that job. My connection to a project ends when they say picture wrap, because it's not for me to decide what people will think about it. I think that's a really healthy attitude. So you take the job, you do the job, and then it's over. So I guess if you're an actor, a director, if you work in that industry, you have to just kind of move on, sort of very quickly. Then she talks about the new show that she's working on. So it's called Ponies. She says, I'm very fortunate to be an actual producer, so I get to be a part of these conversations. It's an opportunity she didn't get on Game of Thrones. Aside from what I brought as an actor, I didn't have any creative input, nor did I want any, Clarke says. Not that she's salty about it. She calls Benioff and Weiss geniuses, while dismissing her younger self as not qualified. I mean, the later stuff, they're not really geniuses, but some of the early seasons, there's a lot of very good stuff there. I think so. I think she's being very generous in describing her former employers as geniuses there. Also, I'm going to go back to this part of the article here. So she's talking about when she got the role for Game of Thrones and realizing what she'd have to do in the pilot episode. Initially, Clarke was ecstatic, but during a pre production vacation with her parents, she read her scenes for the first time. I just cried with fear, she recalls. Daenerys' first few minutes of screen time involve disrobing before being fondled by her on screen brother as he discloses his plan to marry her off to a nomadic tribe of warriors. Can you imagine the terror? She asks. Clarke is at pains to clarify she didn't experience any bad stuff during Game of Thrones. More a general insensitivity to how a 23-year-old might feel standing nude in a room full of strangers. Because I know what it can be, she's talking about the bad stuff, and on Game of Thrones I never had that, Clarke explains. Does that mean she encountered it elsewhere? I've experienced lack of care on other jobs, she replies, which I think could have been prevented with some consideration. So she's raising, I mean, I personally wouldn't want to be nude kind of on screen. And she's saying that there was this kind of general insensitivity, but she's not choosing to paint herself as a victim, which I think is quite sort of grown up. But she does say, I've experienced lack of care on other jobs. When I probe whether she's talking about either Terminator Genesis or Solo, a Star Wars story, both of which had troubled productions, it's the only time during our conversation Clarke politely declines to answer. I don't want to specifically say, she says. There's just been a number of occasions where I've been like, this ain't right. And again, it's not through someone abusing power, it's through lack of thinking and care. Again, I like this. It's a very sort of nuanced take. She's not being specific. She's not calling out particular productions, particular companies, particular people. And she's also adding further nuance by saying it's not someone abusing power. It's not that people are deliberately doing this as such. It's just it's a situation that arises sometimes, and maybe people don't think things through completely. So I like the way that Emilia Clarke is talking about her experiences here. It seems quite nuanced. She's admitting that it's not all black and white. So, yeah, I mean, this is how I think actors, directors, people who work on creative things should talk. She sounds sort of quite mature. She sounds like a grown up. On the other hand, let's have a look at Tatiana Maslany. So this is from the Radio Times. She-Hulk star Tatiana Maslany says her previous Disney criticism wouldn't stop her from reprising my Marvel role. I think Tatiana Maslany, I think she is a great actor. If you haven't seen Orphan Black, I would strongly recommend Orphan Black Season 1, in which she plays multiple roles. But in terms of how she interacts with fans, with the production companies, she's less impressive than Emilia Clarke. For example, the actor, currently starring in Apple TV, supported a Disney boycott last year. So Tatiana Maslany, she played She-Hulk, and her employer makes She-Hulk, but she wanted people to boycott her employer. She wanted people to financially damage her employer. Let's see a little bit about that. She-Hulk, attorney at law star said that her previous criticism of the Walt Disney Company wouldn't stop her from reprising her MCU role. The actor played lawyer turned superhero Jennifer Walters. Maslany is noticeably absent from the cast lists for Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. So, I mean, pretty much everyone and their mum is in Doomsday, but it seems like She-Hulk might not be. Hopes for more She-Hulk projects were raised earlier this year when Marvel's head of television said She-Hulk was one of our best performing shows on Disney Plus. He argued there was a disparity between the general audience and the fan response, the latter of which was broadly critical. His comments came as a surprise, not only because of the vitriol directed at She-Hulk Attorney at Law during its release, but also due to a surprising intervention from Maslany herself last summer. In September 2025, the actor supported a boycott against the Walt Disney Company in response to late-night host Jimmy Kimmel being temporarily suspended from broadcast. And then it goes on to say what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, and he was taken off the air for a few days. As a result, a Disney boycott began in which people cancelled subscriptions to streamers Disney Plus and Hulu, as well as sports network ESPN. At this point, Maslany shared an Instagram story encouraging people to cancel all three. So Tatiana Maslany, she plays She-Hulk, and Disney makes She-Hulk. And then she goes onto social media and she says, hey, just stop giving money to my employer. Stop giving money to Disney. That's absolutely nuts. So this story was widely reported at the time. Here, for example, is Deadline. She-Hulk star Rosie O'Donnell and others issue call to cancel or boycott Disney. So that's all, really. I just wanted to highlight that while there are people who have extremely antagonistic relationships with their employers, with the fans. There are other people like Emilia Clarke who sound much more like adults. So I guess I'm saying be more like Emilia. Thanks for watching.